Yes, friends. Officially on a Monday, we welcome you in through the rain and the shine. After a long 3 days, Andy, we're back for draft week. I'm Adam Arbrecht, and that is the healthy, wealthy, and wise Andrew Makowitz.
This might be Adam Arbrecht's favorite week of the year. Not only does he love the NFL draft, but he loves nothing more than mocking the NFL draft and maybe some mock day trades. I mean, this is really like his Super Bowl, his Christmas. Adam, how pumped are you for this week?
Nothing that goes on after Thursday and the weekend will ever reach the expectations that I've set for myself, for the season, for the team, for the world. Really, this is my Kwanzaa. This is my Hanukkah. This is 8 days of crazy nights for me. You may find out if you check the YouTube channel, there's 16,000 mock drafts between now and Thursday. But today we come in specifically to do our mock draft. And we said last week when we were on the show that we wanted to do two things this week. So today it's going to be what we think the New York Football Giants should do in the upcoming draft. On Wednesday, we're going to go through what we think they will do in the draft. So obviously the rumors and speculation around maybe even trade ups, as we touched on at one point, trade down possibilities for a guy in Dave Gettleman who's never done that in his career. All of those kind of things will factor in more heavily on Wednesday's mock. But today it's about Andy Makowitz in the big chair or myself and trying to decide how do we best construct the best possible team for the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, and I'm excited about this. I think when we watch a lot of other people do mock drafts, they just in their mind take what they want and they assume that that's going to be closest to the pin for the Giants. How Dave Gettleman's thinking is going to be drastically different than how we are, but it's going to be great to find out how the roster ends up being constructed. At the end of the day, I might look around and say, well, Adam, you making that decision in round one or round two really impacted everything else. I kind of like how the board's set up for you a little bit more than me. So this is going to be really good. And then I think on Wednesday's show, as you mentioned, we're going to talk more what we think the Giants are going to do. Like get into Dave Gettleman's head. He said, it's an urban myth I don't trade back, but we all know Dave Gettleman probably will not trade back. So are you excited, Adam? Are you ready for this? What's the format? How are we going to do this?
I am. I'm excited. I'm ready to roll. We're basically going to pin ourselves to about 2 minutes for each selection. We'll be able to bat around our thinking around each pick. If we choose to make trade downs, we can. We can even walk through some possible offers that maybe came in the door. But this basically is going to be 11, 42, 76, 116, 196, and 201. We're going to run through the first 4 rounds in more detail. The back end, we're just going to give you kind of the reference points of positions or guys you may want to keep your eyes on. And we'll probably post up something official on social media that says, hey, these are our lock-in targets at these spots. But we're going to hit the ground running here. I'm going to give you first serve on it. You're going to be up on the board, Andrew Makowitz, at 11. Where are the New York Football Giants going? Andy Makowitz, GM.
All right, so I am running one of the simulators in the background, so we can give you guys some things in real time. It's not like I have all this prepared, so that's kind of how it's going to be for the Giants on the clock. So,
by the way, for the context, when Andy said let the people know how we're going to do this, what he wanted me to tell you was we're using the Pro Football Focus Draft Simulator, and we're doing this in real time. That was the big tidbit. You're on the clock, sir.
There we go. Okay, so I have put the Giants at 11, and I have started it, and it is now to me on the draft simulator. Looking at the board, no huge surprises. All 3 of the big wide receivers are off the board in Chase, Smith, and Waddle. Pitts is obviously off the board. Penei Sewell's off the board. What's interesting in this mock draft is that Kyle Pitts actually dropped to 10 to Dallas, which we know Jerry would just die a happy man if he could get Kyle Pitts at 10. What it means for me at 11 is the big wide receivers are off the board, so there's a little bit of a dip off. There's no edge rusher, or outside linebacker that I'm looking at. Micah Parsons is sitting there at 9, but Adam, I have to be consistent. There's a lot of off field and maturity issues with Parsons that make me just want to stay away. I don't want to deal with that headache again. So really what that leads me to is seeing Rashawn Slater is still on the board and sitting here and saying, guard might be a little bit more of an issue for me than tackle. But the good news is Rashawn Slater has the ability to play both potentially. And depending on how our line shakes out, adding Rashawn Slater to this room and pushing back down on the guard spot or on the tackle spot and getting him to start with our first round draft pick, Andrew Thomas, last year is an opportunity I can't pass up. So I would take Rashawn Slater with the 11th pick.
And I like it. Listen, I think that it's a sound move, right? You and I have talked about it back and forth, what it would mean for the New York Football Giants to lock up, quote unquote, the offensive line positional need that they have and make it feel like it's a feasible reality to go into this season feeling confident at every offensive line position. I mean, it's something that we haven't been able to say in a long time for the New York Football Giants. So obviously, I think that would be a very nice move for Big Blue. Now, on the other side of it, as we said, coming into it, we talk about what we think maybe Gettleman will or will not do. By the way, likewise, in this simulation, Kyle Pitts there at 10. And just for reference, all of the top 5 quarterbacks have gone by the time we get to our selection at 11, which I think rings pretty true, by the way. You know, if you think about the way a lot of these guys are being discussed, including Trey Lance moving up or Justin Fields now getting a little bit more buzz, even with the San Francisco 49ers at 3, somebody's going to come up. If anybody wants him, like Mac Jones, even, he may be the guy that should be furthest out of it. I still think someone's going to come up and get him. Or, like in my simulation, it's just the Denver Broncos sitting pat and ending up getting a quality QB for themselves at the 9th overall selection. The problem here for me now is, in the vein of what I would do, I'd be looking to trade down. I think the New York Football Giants are in a spot here where offensive line is obviously a big need, and we've discussed that. And I think Rashawn Slater is a fantastic selection. But when you consider the idea that edge rusher is as paramount as any spot on this team, I do wonder, and if it's me, I'm looking at the board and saying, I think there might be value in the 2nd round, in the 3rd round, potentially. So maybe there's the ability to address my offensive line need in one of those rounds, as opposed to up at the top here. I tried to trade, just to be clear. I wanted to trade. I fielded some phone calls. I looked for some opportunities. The Arizona Cardinals were one of those teams that wanted to come up from 16 because right now on the board, they'd have the options of Micah Parsons, right? Even teams like the Chicago Bears may want to come up just to secure their player in Rashad Bateman, even though that seems like that'd be way too rich for my blood there. The only other option that I'm going to try here is with the Chargers. And that's because the Chargers are a team that are in line for an offensive lineman. So I'm going to take a shot on this here and see if it does work out. If it doesn't, then I'll be forced to pick here at 11 and live with the results, as they say. Because I've already tried a couple simulations in the back.
You know what? You sound like Dave Gettleman. He's like, you know how many phone calls I've had where I kind of had a trade altogether and then it didn't work out, so I had to take a player? Like, that is what Adam is dealing with. You are getting Gettlemaned, as we like to say. As
a matter of fact, you are. Now, here's the problem, and this is maybe to Gettleman's point. You can want to trade down, but it takes 2 to tango. So I fielded calls from the Arizona Cardinals. I fielded calls from even the Chargers, because I would have been willing to trade down a couple of spots and still get the guy that I was after. If it's me, this may be the unsexy thing. Rashawn Slater is there. He solves the need. He's plug and play at the guard position. And because we're unable to have a trade back here, it means that we're going to be all the way there at 42 with other needs on our board. So we have to be willing to take best player available, plug our needs. Slater's been there consistently over the past month at the top of the draft. So it is going to be Rashawn Slater for me as well at the tackle position, and we'll move our way towards the top of the 2nd round in 42. Before you go in on your selection, Andy, this is the concern though, right? Like the balance of this is a little bit tricky, because I think you and I would both agree, if it was possible for us to just, even with a trade downs or not, be picking at, say, 15 or 16, and if Slater was there, great, but Vera Tucker would be just as well for us, right? I think you'd prefer to be getting any of these picks a few spots back and maybe having some extra assets.
Yeah, that's the tough part, especially the way the draft has played out so far in our simulations. Adam, all 3 of the wide receivers are off the board for me, and it sounds like they obviously were for you. If one of them was on the board, does that change anything from how you're thinking, or the fact that Slater's there and you can't trade back, is he the guy that you're taking regardless of who else is on the board?
Yeah, without the ability to trade back, I stay pretty locked into Slater. And I think on Wednesday, the discussion around if a wide receiver was there, how would that impact Dave Gettleman's thinking? I think that's the big question that's going to be interesting to watch on Thursday.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel like I could see things changing. I wouldn't be upset getting a top 3 wide receiver because I do think that there's a drop off there, when we talk about talent. But I'm happy with Rashawn Slater. Like I said, can play guard or tackle. Really makes me feel more comfortable with my offensive line. We've invested heavily over the last 2 years. And now I'm moving into the second round, and I have the 42nd pick, Adam. And so when I run this, I look down, and there's quite a few different players available. You look at some of the different guys like Elijah Moore that have gone recently at wide receiver. There's a couple of different tackles like Alex Leatherwood that go right before me. I don't need a running back, so Najee Harris going to the Broncos is not really that big of a deal. But really, I have one glaring need after taking Rashawn Slater, and that is some kind of situational pass rusher, outside linebacker, edge rusher. Because I didn't address it in the first round, because I didn't see value in going up and getting an Ojulari or too much risk with Jalen Phillips. I'm now sitting here kind of having to draft for need more than just best player available. And as I look at it, there's one guy that's on the board that sticks out. Maybe it's a little bit rich to be able to get him, but that's Joseph Asai out of Texas. The fact that he's here for me in the second round, he's got really good size at 6'4". He's explosive. He can get to the quarterback. I'm excited about it. He seems like a great prospect for me on how I'm constructing this roster during draft day. And in my first 2 picks, I've addressed the offensive line. I've addressed the pass rushing, situation that we kind of have right now. And I'm actually feeling good after the first 2 picks. I'd say if this is the way that the Giants, end up having this fall out, obviously I'm the picker. So I'm feeling pretty excited about where we're at. What are your thoughts so far?
I like it. No, listen, I'll tell you why I like that, because on my board, Joseph Osai goes 38 to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Wow.
So, this is the interesting thing and why I'm looking for those trade downs at 11 if I can, because when you don't do it, once the run on edge rusher starts, it may not stop. So the debate starts to come up, I think. Is there a point, or is there a mindset here for the New York Football Giants that if we can't move out of 11, we have to think about edge rusher, as early as that may feel? So as I get into the second round, a guy like Jason Owe fell just outside at 34. He went to the Jets, right, playing in the same stadium as us. As I said, Osai goes there at 38. And then even at 41, Nick Bolton out of Missouri went to the Detroit Lions. So now, this is why it's a difficult draft, because now as I look at the board, there's a lot of players that we're not going to be getting into, like another tackle, a Walker Little. Tevin Jenkins has fallen on my board. I'd be surprised if that was the case on draft night. And then you get into some more traditional inside linebackers or even wide receivers. Diami Brown is out there on the board, obviously, as well. If it's me, and this is the way the board falls right now, I want edge rusher and I need an edge rusher, but also I can't go beyond what's being offered to me, right? I can't go beyond what the board says. So I'm in a little bit of a bind here. Either I'm going to reach down the board slightly and go for a little bit more of a guy that's going to need time to develop, but currently has the exact skill set that the Giants need as far as getting after the quarterback on the edge, or I do what I think a lot of Giants fans would like, which is maybe take a wide receiver here, right? Go with a dynamic playmaker like Diami Brown, who I've talked about before and really been a fan of. But I'm going to stick to what I think it is: offensive line, edge rusher, and then it's kind of opened up to wide receiver, etc. And because of that, I'm going down the board a little bit, all the way to the player that is currently ranked. I'm going to do just a quick double check here to make sure I'm not missing any possible guys we could go after. And that does include, by the way, a player like Ronnie Perkins. Boy, it's a tough one here. So there's a player in Tryon that I was gonna go down and get because I like what he can develop into. My concern is about how long it'll take him to develop and if that value pick is there. Seeing Ronnie Perkins flash here, edge rusher, Oklahoma. This is a guy that came out with a grade plus 90 in run and pass defense grades. So just like Joseph Osai, by the way, who has pass and run defense grades in plus 80, close to 84, 85. Ronnie Perkins is the guy for me. He falls here, 43rd overall rank on the board. And that, my friends, is who the New York Football Giants draft in the second round of my mock draft, Ronnie Perkins, edge rusher out of Oklahoma.
It is interesting because you look back at what happened in mine and where Ronnie Perkins was. He was there available for me on the board. He actually went 49th to the Arizona Cardinals, who needed some edge rush help there. Like you said, it is interesting. You think you have the exact prospect that you want the Giants to draft, and then all of a sudden they get taken 10 picks earlier, and you need to be able to go with the flow and adapt in some of these certain situations. I thought going into this that one of those 3 wide receivers was going to be available in the first round. They weren't. Makes the decision a little bit easier. But if Rashawn Slater's gone and there's not a run on quarterbacks, all of a sudden I'm in a whole different ball game. And that's really what these GMs are facing every time they go into this. You really don't know. And then, the variables just continue to get exponentially larger and larger as you get into the second and third round. I would say on this one, I got fortunate that, Joseph Asai is there for me. But certainly, we're both thinking along the same lines. We're thinking, got to shore up the offensive line, got to shore up edge rush at almost any cost.
Yeah, and I think to your point, personally, Osai is behind Perkins on most draft boards by a handful of spots, but I like him better. I like him as a better fit for the New York Football Giants. So in that situation where they're both there, I think you made the right call going with Joseph Asai. I'm kind of it's not defaulting because as I read the grades there, right? Perkins, quality player, but I just think fitting the specific needs and a little bit of versatility, a little more versatile potentially coming in the door in Osai. We move now on to round 3 and pick 76 for the New York Football Giants. Andy Makowitz has taken Rashawn Slater at 11. He came back with Joseph Osai out of Texas at 42. Now on the board at 76, I know, Andy, for a fact that you're looking at the wide receiver group.
And why is that, Adam?
Because if Jalen Waddle was there at 11, you would have drafted him. So I know that you are on board with, on the same page with wanting to get a quality wide receiver talent and not wanting to get too far into the weeds here in the draft and making sure you feel like you've targeted a player that you like and want to go get.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different reasons why, at this pick right now, I am looking at what is available at the wide receiver position. One is, Sterling Shepard, has been injured quite a bit. The cap hit in releasing Sterling Shepard after this upcoming season drops to like $2 million. So if the Giants wanted to move on from Shepard at any point, they could. They went out and addressed, the number 1 wide receiver in Kenny Golladay. We're still trying to figure out what we have in Darius Slayton. He has shown flashes. He has shown the ability to get down the field. But also, when he's matched up against a number 1 type corner, there are games where he will go catchless, which is really, really tough to rely on, especially when you're thinking about the progression of Daniel Jones. So with all of that said, we got a guy like John Ross in the building. We have some depth at the position, especially guys on our practice squad. I still want to add to the room, Adam, and I want to add in the third round, to your point, because once we start getting to the 5th, 6th, 7th round, I don't even know if these guys are going to make the roster. We already have a ton of those, throw lotto ticket, throw a dart at the board and hope you hit guys, right?
I'm going to ring the bell here and I'm going to announce your pick for you. We don't know each other's selections. We don't know the draft boards, but watch this. And with the 76th overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft, Andy Makowitz's New York Football Giants select Josh Palmer, wide receiver out of Tennessee.
That would be correct, Adam. That would be correct. It was, looking at my board, it was down between 2 guys I really like a lot. Josh Palmer and Nico Collins are still both there for me. I think, to be honest with you, I think Nico Collins has a little bit more upside, but kind of what the Giants need. Josh Palmer fits it a little bit better. Josh Palmer seems like a Joe Judge kind of guy, like get in there, work hard, do my job from, I don't know, Adam, it's a match made in heaven. I've talked about Josh Palmer on this show at least 4 or 5 different times. I really like him as a prospect. Getting him in the third round, I have addressed all 3 of the needs that I've wanted to going in. And I feel like I got top players at each of the positions. Getting Rashawn Slater in, getting Joseph Asai, and getting Josh Palmer, I would write the ticket for this right now.
Yep, you have to feel pretty good about what you've done. I come up here on my side of things, and to give you a sense of it, right, one of the players, because I'm not against taking wide receivers. There's been mocks where I've gone with Diami Brown in the second round because I think he's such a well-built, reliable, both deep and intermediate target for the New York Football Giants potentially. But obviously, you got to make sure you're checking off the boxes of needs. But other players that I've mentioned, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, he went 71 to the Denver Broncos. Other guys, I think I've mentioned, like Wallace, he goes even earlier, up at 60 to the New Orleans Saints. So some of my kind of second, third, even into the fourth round targets have already gotten away from me here at this point of the draft, which makes it a little bit more interesting. Player like Palmer is there for me if I want. I don't evaluate him as highly maybe as you do. So I don't know what the value would be there. If he's there if I find him there in the fourth round, which I think would be a drop for him, then I'd be excited to take him. It's hard for me to come up in this particular spot and get overly excited about taking a wide receiver that I think no matter who you take is going to be a little bit of a stretch at this point, or a little bit of a reach.
Is there any other position? Yeah. Is there any other position if you feel like wide receiver is going to be a stretch and you'll look to see if you get value later? What's the other position that comes to your mind now that you've addressed offensive line and edge rush? Is it doubling down on one of those positions? Is there another area where you think we could fill the gaps, Adam?
Yeah, so I know that people have talked about cornerback being a possibility as far as, again, same thing you're speaking about, the wide receiver position, building for the long-term future here. There are a couple of options on the board right now. A Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky, I think would be a really has good length, nice guy that you could bring into the room and develop behind some of these guys. If you wanted to go, some people have said defensive lineman might be an option here too, like a Milton Williams out of Louisiana Tech. Like, you can think about these, but third round feels like just a bit too far, just a bit too early, excuse me, for some of these, like, let's develop for the future here. And I'm not even necessarily putting Josh Palmer into that category, but I just think there's still guys that can plug in and be contributors. What I'm going to go for here, because at the top of my board, Jabril Cox, LSU, is still there. So you talk about other areas. Well, now I could be looking at a guy on the inside to pair with Blake Martinez and be the future of that position. I want to take a little bit of a risk here and just see if I might be able to get myself a little bit of extra value, because as it stands right now, I'm comfortable with, but don't love what's happened in the draft so far as getting real and true value out of this draft for myself. So I look across the room, I get a phone call from the Chicago Bears. They want to come up a handful of spots from 83 to 76. I'm going to try to execute a trade with them, which gets accepted. Now, we can debate about whether or not I got enough value, etc. To come up to 76, I got their 83rd pick. I also got 164 and a future fourth round selection from them. So that's what's nice here. So now at this spot where I feel like there's more than enough talent, and I think a lot of people would say Jabril Cox is probably the easy answer there. You got to go do it. I've now given myself an extra pick to work with here, though, so that affords me the ability to look at the board and find the best available player that's going to help this team overall. I'm in between two guys here now. Cameron Sample, edge rusher out of Tulane. He's a guy that's going to be more in the Leonard Williams mold, sliding in around across the three front here, or a surprise selection, Andy Makowitz. And I'm actually going to I think I'm going to go with that surprise here. And this is going to probably blow your socks off here, Andrew Makowitz. You're not going to see this one coming. I've given myself an extra pick, as I said, at 164. So in the third round at 83, I'm actually going to go with the Notre Dame product. Tommy Tremble, tight end. He has one of the best run blocking grades out of college at the tight end position. He's also capable of going out in routes and catching the football. And I think when you look at this roster and we talk about Evan Ingram and his deficiencies and where he may end up in the spectrum of this team, and Kyle Rudolph and where he is in his career, and maybe the relative disappointment of a Toaloa and Caden Smith not being a blocking tight end, I think this is the pseudo way that you continue to bolster the protection for Daniel Jones and the ability for Saquon Barkley to have one of the biggest seasons while also building that tight end position for the future. So I go with Tommy Tremble at 83.
That's an interesting one, Adam, because when you listen to some of Dave Gettleman press conferences and different things, it doesn't seem like they're really thinking about the tight end position after going out and getting Kyle Rudolph. It seems like it's a position of strength for us at this moment. But having Evan Ingram on the last year of his deal and not necessarily sure where he's going to be is a little bit tricky. So I don't mind the pick. I'd be okay developing that talent there. But I think you were kind of in an interesting spot where you just didn't see value in some of the other positions.
Yeah, and Cameron Sample would have been an option, I think, for me. I really like him a lot there. But my thinking on this is big picture. Now, Caden Smith, Toaloa, you guys very well may not be here by the start of the season. This can be an Evan Ingram Kyle Rudolph, and now Tommy Tremble room where I can put Kyle Rudolph and Tremble on each line together when I want to run 2 tight end sets and really be a power as far as being the option of, and the respect the teams will have to pay, run versus pass.
Yeah, and you've balanced things out pretty well so far during the draft. I still think, depending on how you view wide receiver, it's probably still an area that you need.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't mind it. I mean, you're taking talent. You were able to trade back and accumulate some picks. We know that that might be a challenge for Gettleman, but I like the accumulation of assets that you're working with. Now
for you, it's on to the 4th round selection, right? 116 on the board. You've gone with your offensive lineman. You've gotten your edge rusher. You've gotten your wide receiver. Again, I like to use my instincts here. I think Andy is going to try to supplement the defensive side of the ball, maybe with another linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, Adam, because in these mocks, sometimes guys fall to you, and it just seems pretty unfair. Jimin Davis of the linebacker out of Kentucky is, his average draft position's been 94. He is going through a massive slide on my board right now. He is Mr. Do-It-All, inside linebacker, can run, sideline to sideline. I don't know, Adam, you tell me. It seems pretty criminal that he's still on my board and available. If he was there in a situation like this, I would love to pair him inside with Blake Martinez and feel like I've solidified the 3-4 outside line and inside linebacking positions. But sure, it could be a little bit of a challenge to see him drop this far when some people are saying he's like a fringe probably a 2nd round pick, maybe.
Yeah, ranked 41st overall on the board. And then, like you said, getting drafted closer to 100. He's on my board as well. I think the thing that's getting missed here in this simulation and in general is that he's been rising. Like, his draft stock has been rising. So I feel like it's more likely that someone maybe grabs him, even if he slips from the back in the 2nd into the 3rd round. But I'm not going to stop you from doing it. He's there on the board for you. If you want to go with him because it's the value, I'm not going to knock you. And I would understand it, obviously, because I'm assuming if you look through your board a little bit, there's not a lot of other linebackers that jump out at you right now in this moment, this spot, before you start really kind of working your way down into the hundreds and the 120s of prospect rankings.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? We have a bunch of inside linebackers that may be able to play some of these positions already that are kind of those dart throws that we talked about. You have your Tay Crowders and Cam Browns that play along the offensive, the linebacking positions. If I wait any longer to get another linebacker, it's them competing, and it's a bunch of 6th and 7th round guys competing for a starting spot. If I take a guy like Davis right now, I know that he's a guy that could be going in the 2nd or 3rd round, and I'm getting him at value in the hundreds right now. So with my pick, I'm going to lock that in and take Jamin Davis at 116, probably the steal of the draft.
Yeah, listen. Every single year. Oh, by the way, you know what I mean?
Thank you. I mean, come on.
Yeah. What's the point of having bells and whistles if you're not going to ring them? Every single year, somebody falls, right? A prospect slips. And if you're a team that's looking at a player like Davis and you end up taking, Jabril Cox the round before, you take Jabril Cox in the 2nd or 3rd round, all of a sudden your need hierarchy shifts. So you're not looking at Davis anymore, right? And it's going to end up coming down to a team that maybe has that need and didn't realize that he was going to be available for him, and then it becomes a steal. So I can't knock you taking him. It'd be interesting to see. There's always someone, maybe it will be Davis, that falls. I'd be surprised only because his stock has seemingly been rising as we move towards the draft on Thursday. I'm up at 116 now for myself, and just like you, Davis is there. I'll go a different direction for sake of argument here, but I can make the choice of, do I want to supplement what I've done on the defensive side of the ball? I've now gotten myself a tight end in the 3rd round. I think a quality pick, but I have pushed off that need at wide receiver. So the real question becomes, what am I more concerned about improving here, the offense or the defensive side of the ball? Kelvin Joseph, by the way, that cornerback out of Kentucky, he is still there on my board, 67th on the draft board and getting drafted closer to 100. So not a crazy drop if he were to fall here. But I think at this stage, when I look out across the landscape of it, I'm either going to be going with a wide receiver here if I can find the right talent, or I'd even be willing to supplement my offensive line play as well. I kick myself down here a little bit. 2 options come to mind for me. You have, of course, wide receivers that we've talked about. And by the way, your Josh Palmer is still here at 116 for me. I've
Wow.
also highlighted, I know, and listen, that's maybe one of the I'd say unrealistic, right? But it depends on when these wide receiver runs happen. Another guy that's there for me is Jalen Darden out of North Texas, who I've highlighted before. Smaller school, but has all that twitchy, short, tight space kind of work from a wide receiver that you maybe like. But as I work down the board, I'm going to go again short-term, long-term here, and maybe safeguard against any potential issues that we could run into across the offensive line. A player like Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame. He's a player that is projected to be a convert over to center. He gets an incredibly high draft grade of 89.96 coming off of his last season. So it feels like in the short term, you're going to get what? Competition potentially at a guard role. Now he plays at tackle at college, but guard competition potentially for a Rashawn Slater, a Hernandez if he's still there. We know that Lemieux is going to be there as well. So let's mix it up here. I want the best possible line to get formed, and then in the long term, I have someone that could move to another position, maybe even compete for backup swing tackle role behind Pert and behind Thomas. I like the value for him here. I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger at 116, and I feel comfortable taking Robert Hainsey out of Notre Dame because I have that extra pick that I grabbed with that small trade down in the third round.
Now, with Hainsey, a lot of people are saying he could kick even further inside. Talk to me about how that impacts Nick Gates or anything else in your mind. Is it just positional depth along the line? Could be a swing tackle of the future, or is it someone that could give competition to Gates inside? Like, where would you see that type of fit for the Giants?
Yes. So here's the interesting thing. And I've been pretty consistent around. I like wanting to have consistency in front of Daniel Jones, right? So that'd be Nick Gates in year number 2 at center. But we know that he's played at guard. We know that he's played all the way out to tackle. So now when I walk into this room, I say, well, Slater's going to be earmarked for a starting job. But does Shane Lemieux is he locked in to being the starting left guard? He's a 5th round selection. He played admirably, but struggled mightily in pass protection. So now when I go into training camp, I'm going to have Hainsey, Nick Gates, Rashawn Slater, and even Shane Lemieux and say, I want the best 3, guard, center, guard. And however that shakes out is going to be perfectly fine by me. And I could see a world where if Hainsey came into camp and looked strong at center, let's say, now I can move Gates to a left guard role and have a Gates, Hainsey, and Slater combination across the front, and then allow a guy like Lemieux to be my backup across those 3 positions, 3 positions on the inside of the line throughout the season. So depth and strength, I think, is what I'm building with a value pick in the 4th round.
I like it, Adam. I think we've addressed the Rashawn Slater situation in the 1st round, but I don't think the Giants are just going to add one offensive lineman in this draft. So clearly there's going to be another one. It's just a matter of when, and when does the positional need start to factor in for them?
Yeah, exactly. And now, by the way, so just quickly here, because we're not going to go into deep detail with our 196 and 201s. I'll let Andy, I'm going to scan over because I have that extra pick at 164 from the trade with the Chicago Bears. I'm going to let Andy just break down what your positions or any names you might have on your mind for later in the draft, the 6th round picks, developmental prospects. Where do you think the Giants will look to address some needs there?
Yeah, so there's 2 things. One is depending on how they see Slater fitting in on that offensive line, I do think that they need to still grab another guard or a tackle to try to come in and compete for a roster spot. When we're getting into the 200s, it's getting a little further down the list. So I think that's one area that the Giants are going to go, but there's clearly another area that the Giants are going to draft a player in at some point, and that is the running back position. So while they have all-pro, all-world Saquon Barkley, they wildly overpaid for Devontae Booker to be their running back number 2. They really do need an influx of talent and potentially a prospect that can come in and situationally do some things for the Giants. When I look at someone in particular, Adam, I think Puka Williams Jr. Out of Kansas is a guy that has electric speed, can take the top off of a defense. And that's kind of what I'm thinking that we would need to supplement, both Booker and Barkley. Barkley is great and it is electric. Booker can play all 3 downs. So there's not really a specific area of need that the Giants need at running back. I think a guy with elite speed and breakaway speed and get him the ball in his hands situationally could be another asset for the Giants.
Yeah, I like that. I think it makes sense. And that feels as much a build for the short and the long term, right? Another dynamic playmaker out of the backfield. And then again, is Booker going to be here on multiple contracts? Of course not. So, locking in who's going to be behind Saquon Barkley after losing Wayne Gallman this past offseason, signed with the San Francisco 49ers, tip of the hat to him for having a great opportunity out there with San Francisco. I think his style of play will fit there really nicely. So just, fond farewell to Wayne Gallman. But how are you going to protect and safeguard against injuries for Saquon Barkley? How are you going to be able to offer him the relief and the reps off so that when he does come in, he's as dynamic and explosive as he's ever been? Remember, coming off of an injury. So I think you're right. Remember, they have a guy like Platzgummer in the in the pipeline coming over from Europe. A player that I've liked is Jarrett Patterson out of Buffalo. And by the way, at my 164, he's off the board now. So this draft today has gone completely differently than I've taken it almost every other mock draft simulation. The Slater piece is still there, but the next three selections that I've made are not ones that I have made in most of my mocks. So now at 164, just to round things out, I'm looking at who's available and what are some of the potential fits to help supplement what we've done so far. Wide receiver is still a need here for me, obviously. Listen, I'm going to frame it this way. I have 2 picks in the 6th round. I'm going to package those. Maybe I'll dip into next year's and use one of those 5th round picks to get myself up the board and target a wide receiver that I like. But for me right now, I think I have to consider a couple of things. What is the long-term future next to Blake Martinez? And when I scroll down the board, I come across a guy who we had highlighted by a guest that we had on a few weeks ago from Ohio State. And that's Justin Hilliard out of Ohio State Buckeyes, right? He's a guy that hasn't played a ton, gets a really good grade at 82, and I think he's just a consistent player. Is he going to need a little bit of time to develop his skill set? Yes, but that's why you have Blake Martinez. And, 164, is he just going to be another dart throw like a Cam Brown, like a Carter Coughlin, later round selection? Possibly. And that's why I pivot. And at 164, I grabbed the guy that I've highlighted before. This is a familiar name. That's Jalen Darden, North Texas wide receiver. Smaller school. You have to wonder about the competition level that he's played against. But the big benefit is that this is a kid that displays everything on tape that you want. Small space twitchiness, great going over the middle of the field, can get him out in space, use him out of the backfield routes, bubble screens to the wide receiver. I think it's a value selection. I think it gives us a guy to develop, maybe as a replacement potentially for Sterling Shepard. And while Giants fans may think it's far too late, the wide receiver class is deep, and you can find talent all the way into the 4th and 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, when you're getting back here and you're looking at these fifth round guys, you're looking for guys to fill out roster spots, not necessarily be a week 1 starter for teams. Look at Shane Lemieux. He was a 5th round pick and came in halfway through the year and started to get some reps when Hernandez struggled. So you look at someone like this who can fill in. We know one of the wide receivers is going to be injured at some point on our team, and you just figure out where all these different guys are going to fall. You have a guy like John Ross or Darius Slayton. You're not 100% sure what you're going to get from them. Galladay was injured for a good portion of the year last year. Adding wide receiver depth is one of the reasons why I took Palmer as early as I did. So I like this pick. I think a little bit of the unknown at the smaller school, to your point. We hope it doesn't end up translating to something like Ramses Barden, where, came in, didn't know too much, and then the film looked better than the play on the field. But when you're drafting down the board this far, you trust your scouting departments and you really hope that you can hit a home run with one of these guys.
100%, man. So I'll let you, just in case you haven't, run through and just, make those selections at those back end picks. And then to close this out before we get out the door, we'll be right back in on Wednesday doing it from the New York Football Giants perspective. Remember, I wanted to trade down in this draft. It was difficult for me to find the right partner who could do it. So I fell into the Dave Gettleman trap. But once I close this out, on my draft board, at 11, Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern, the tackle. We assume he's going to kick into guard. Solve that problem there. 42, it's Ronnie Perkins, edge rusher out of Oklahoma. Quality player, gets plus 90 grades in both run and pass defense, like giving Patrick Graham a weapon. I make that slight trade down with the Chicago Bears to get back to 83. I picked up 164 and a fifth round pick in next year's draft. I got graded out as a B trade. And at 83, I took Tommy Tremble. Gets a very high draft grade as well. A- on him. We know why we're bringing him in, to be a run blocker, and also developmental pass catcher. Think about him as a poor man's Kyle Rudolph in a lot of ways. 116, Robert Hainsey, tackle out of Notre Dame, could maybe kick all the way inside to center. So I've built up the offensive line strength, not resting on my laurels of third and fifth round hits from years prior. Jalen Darden at 164, give me that wide receiver. And then at 196 and 201, it's edge rusher Shaka Toney. So I'm doubling down on getting after the quarterback. I really like him. If he were to fall there, that'd be absolutely phenomenal selection. Keep his name on your mind for the Giants in the later rounds. And then I get that running back, Elijah Mitchell, out of Louisiana to help out in the running back room. My overall grades are A, A-, 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 and A-. An overall draft grade of an A for the New York Football Giants, as I feel like I've addressed the areas of need and with some late round picks, given some really good depth boost to key positions on this roster.
Yeah, Adam, they grade you up pretty well, and you got to be pretty excited if you walk away addressing all the positions that you did there. When we talk about how my board ends up looking, so I was very similar, getting Rashawn Slater at 11. For the edge rushing position that I desperately needed help in, I took Joseph Asai at 42. The only other position, I love that one. The only other position I really wanted to make sure I addressed was wide receiver. And in the third round, my guy Josh Palmer still sitting there. I wanted to make that selection. Jimin Davis is the one that seems a little strange to me. Pro Football Focus actually gave me a C+ for drafting Jimin Davis at 116, which if he's there at 116 and people are going to give you a C+ grade, I don't know what the grading system it really is there, because that felt like a steal.
To be clear, I want to let you off the hook on this one. I've run a lot of simulations. There is no third or fourth round linebacker inside linebacker that you can take and not get a C+ grade. It just seems to be the value of that position. So this one isn't on Andy Makowitz. This is just where the draft is in the position. Although, maybe you can glean a little bit about value, but I don't know how a guy like Davis falling there would make sense. Either way, though, we can safely assume Andy finds a linebacker there at that spot.
Yeah, and then in the back end, 196 and 201, I said from the start that we need to draft a running back at some point. So Puka Williams Jr. is there for me. And then at 201, I want to add another guard to the mix. As I said before, I don't think we're drafting just one offensive lineman. And Tristan Hoagie of BYU was there as a guy that projects as a pure guard, can fight for reps with Hernandez, Shane Lemieux, and Zach Fulton. And overall, I end up getting a grade of A-, so I'm pretty happy. But I mean, Adam ends up scoring out a little bit better, moving and shaking around the board and addressing different needs. So kudos.
Yes. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. Where's my? I need my. Let's see. Ready? Adam had the best board. Let's see how it sounds. That wasn't right. We try to work the board as much as we can, but no. Listen, that's what it comes down to, though. Again. And this is almost a good example of it, because I've talked so much about Giants should trade down, get value, trade down, get value. Then it's draft day and nobody is willing to, I don't have the trade partner. I'm not getting the value back. And it speaks to what Gettleman said about, you want to trade down. That's awesome. But you don't want to feel like you're getting ripped off. You want to feel like you're getting the value. So being forced to make these kind of picks, I think changed my approach to the draft. I still managed to find a little bit of value in that third round trading down slightly, and that made it feasible to take some different positions that I normally would. This is going to be a lot of fun. When we come back in on Wednesday, it's going to be about from the New York Football Giants perspective. And I will guarantee you for a fact, neither one of us is going to be making the same 2 first-round selections. I really do not think it's going to be the case, because it's based on what I think the New York Football Giants want to accomplish and how their hierarchy goes. You mentioned at the top, Andy, what if a wide receiver is there at 11? I think that throws a big wrinkle. And if he's not, positional value, I think the Giants are looking at this draft class and this draft board a little bit differently than maybe you and I think they should be.
Yeah, and that's why we wanted to separate these two, because when you do one mock draft, you're like, oh, is that what the Giants need? Is it what you want them to do? Is that what's in Gettleman's head? I think this is a better way to show we would build out the roster this way. We would both start with offensive tackle, work our way through edge rusher, so on and so forth. I don't know if that's going to be what Dave Gettleman has in mind. There's also some different reports that are coming out this week, like there will be that Gettleman likes certain players and Joe Judge likes other players. So it's going to be interesting. And neither of those players that I'm mentioning that the rumors are around are ones that Adam and I drafted. So you know that there's going to be some unique picks going in here, especially in the first couple rounds with some hot names coming off the board.
You better believe it. Be sure to follow us, of course, on YouTube where we broadcasted this live. Follow the podcast wherever you get your needs fulfilled. Follow us on social media at One Giant Podcast. We will post up on our Instagram account the full draft profiles that we each went with, the grades that came along with it, and maybe even some supplemental information about these guys. Wednesday, the New York Football Giants, Dave Gettleman / Joe Judge edition of the 2021 draft. Thank you for checking in with us. And Andy Makowitz would need, and he demand that you know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.
Bang.